Hello, one. Hello, all. My name is Maximus Meadowcroft, and this is my presentation on the impact of artificially generated art. In this, I'm going to be talking about how this artificially generated art through neural networks and machine learning affects artists and the art community as a whole. So, first, to get into an overview of this presentation, I'm going to start with a definition of AI generated art and go over a real world analogy that can kind of help paint a picture in your guys' minds to understand how it works and what it's similar to in non-digital sense. Then I'm going to be talking about some benefits of AI art. Then I'm going to be talking about some of the challenges and art and ethical considerations. After that, I'll get into 2 case studies. Then I'm going to get into how we as a society should be addressing all of these challenges. So, to get into it, what is AI generated art? So, AI generated art is basically in the title. It's art generated by an artificial intelligence, non-human, machine learning model generally. So these models learn from large data sets of existing artwork, and they're able to, with them, understand different artistic elements and styles and what basically makes up a painting in order to put something as a whole, or not just a painting, just any form of art in general. So after they're trained from these large data sets and gain this knowledge of what makes up art, users are able to provide prompts or parameters, and the AI will use its learned information in order to predict what to generate from what the user says. Then the user will tell it usually for a while if it does a good or bad job, and that'll help with training, etc. But even after it's generated, many of these networks have techniques like GANs or transformers that help the AI refine the images to actually enhance the quality and realism of the piece. So a non-computer analogy to this is, or could be a chef learning to cook by studying hundreds of recipes before him. So the chef studies different cuisines, hundreds of recipes, how to make them, and eventually he learns actually what different things go into making something taste good or making a certain dish. So after all this training, someone's able to request a dish from the chef, and he might have never seen it before. He might have never cooked it before, but he's able to cook it even with any substitutions or dietary restrictions or anything like that because of this past knowledge. This is basically how these AI networks work to generate art. Is they're learning from past data and learning what makes up art, then taking a request and predicting what it should be. So now I'm going to be going over some of the benefits of this. And one of them is actually these images are all AI generated from ChatGPT DALL-E. So that's a pretty cool benefit right there. Okay, so first, innovation in artistic process. So AI generated art right now through the art community and a lot of artists as a whole is used for inspiration and used to build off of. So a lot of artists are actually generating AI images and then using that for inspiration or a starting point for their artworks. And this kind of blends over into one of my next topics I'm going to cover in the next slide. But basically, think of like human models and how painters learn human anatomy and use reference pictures of real life people and also photos in order to help them in their paintings. So artists are doing this with AI. They're imagining something in their head. They're generating a feasible image of it with artificial intelligence. Then they're using that as a reference in order to create art. Furthermore, these references can combine multiple styles and ideas that are really hard to find or would be hard to recreate without artificial intelligence. So one of these things might be like, say you want to combine 2 very contrasting art styles and you want to paint a picture of like a bird. It's going to be really hard to find some kind of inspiration for that or some kind of reference picture for that. So using artificial intelligence allows artists to basically focus on what they actually want to do and what they think is important. It also gives way for new forms of art. So there are many trends that have happened in recent times and throughout history where artists actually take different mediums and combine them with their own. And people are doing this with AI art. So people are taking AI generated images and building off of them into something new and something beautiful. So people one example of this that people are using, which most of the time isn't really for art but is for editing instead, is Photoshop's generative AI, because people are able to select something, generate a new artificial image to replace that section, and be good. But AI art gives people the expansion, creativity in order to use it to build off of and use it as an asset in future works. It also enhances human creativity and speed. So this image is actually, this one's not the best one, but this is of a UI UX design. So UI UX designers are actually using AI a lot to generate basic ideas and concepts for landing pages, websites, etc., that then they'll go into and rework a bit, redesign a bit, and this is saving them a lot of time. This can also allow them to just generate this, show it to the client, make sure they're on the same page, and then make something more. So this is actually an example of it enhancing humans' ability and making it easier for them so humans can focus on what they need to focus on. Similarly, I saw a bunch of case studies where people were doing this with concept art for video games and movies and TV shows, where they would generate ideas and type their ideas into these AIs and then get pictures of their abstract ideas in a more concrete way that could help them see their vision fully. Another way this is used is with tattoo design. So tattoo artists are actually taking a request from a client, generating AI art, and then refining it and drawing kind of a similar thing in order to speed up the process and make sure that their client is actually getting exactly what they want. So now I want to take a second to talk about how all art is derived from past works in a sense. So artists, usually when they're learning, they don't just learn concepts like lines and stuff. They learn concepts like what previous artists did. So this piece is actually from Carlo Alberto Rastelli, and I found this in an article, and he was just talking about how his style he got basically from Robert Lusander, John Curran, and Andrea Mastrovito. So basically he combined those three artists' art styles in a sense, maybe evolved it a little bit, and was able to create his own unique style from it. And I would argue that most of the time this is what artificial intelligence are doing. They're taking styles, getting a request, maybe evolving it a little bit with a little bit of like noise and grain, and then outputting a piece. It's just slightly different because they're robots, of course, instead of humans. So now I'm going to get into some challenges and ethical considerations. Even with all the positives, AI generated art has a lot of problems still that need to be addressed, and this section aims to talk about some of these. So one of these is authenticity and authorship of these pieces. It's really hard and vague to determine how different people should be compensated for the artwork. So since the models are trained on large data sets of past artworks, many people think that those past artists should be compensated in some way for it, and it's a really gray area. And then furthermore, it's really hard to determine who really owns a lot of these pieces. There's not really a clear-cut way to go about it right now. It's kind of right now up to the models that create it on how they want to go about this copyright. Then there's separate copyright on the data sets that they train off of. So sometimes they'll have to pay for those data sets. Sometimes they'll have to just a magnitude of things, which is a pretty good way to go about it, but it still kind of undermines everyone involved in some sense, especially if the AI arts are making a lot of money and generating a lot of revenue based on not much compensation for how they're trained or where they're getting them from, etc. So this actually leads to an economic impact on artists generally. So AI art is able to really well make basic digital art, like art for this presentation. Now, if I didn't have AI generated art for this, I'd probably go to a stock photo website like Unsplash or something. But since I do, I'm able to just create it. And this takes away from some creators' abilities to earn income. And people worry that over time, this is going to expand into more than just simple use cases like this. So it's actually starting to expand into a magnitude of things. There's corporate headshot AIs. There's just all kinds of different artists that are from these AIs. So instead of humans doing the art job, now it's artificial intelligences doing it. This is especially a risk for digital artists because AI is able to make digital art really well compared to something like physical art where it hasn't really achieved to right now. So there's also concerns about artistic integrity and human touch. Art is a very human thing, and some people actually think is one of the most human things. And its purpose, generally, historically, has been to elicit and show and translate emotion into a medium. And with artificial intelligence, at the point being, there's not really any emotion. So there's a level of need for humans to relate to other humans with art. And the further it gets away from humans, this human touch could be seen as less genuine and less good overall and less important, which is kind of taking away from some of the core things that art strives to do. And people can get emotion from anything. So AI can generate a piece of art, and a human could look at it and they could feel something. They could get emotion from it, but it kind of makes it less genuine in a sense, because instead of someone else putting emotion into something, then you feeling emotion from it and having that kind of connection of emotion between the two forms, it's just one-sided. So now I'm going to get into 2 case studies and examples talking about some real-world implications of AI art. The first of these is this iScience article I found on who gets credited for AI-generated art. And this art piece right here on the screen, actually in 2018 sold for $432,000 at Christie's art auction. So this is an example where artificial art is in a sense kind of taking away from artists. It's hard to say if the AI art wasn't there, if the buyer would have bought something else instead, but it's definitely someone going into the domain and market and who's able to be successful and make money from artificially intelligently generated art. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting and cool that these art pieces at auctions are selling and that there's some validity to it. So now, even with that, I believe the person who generated the piece got all the money, which raises ethical concerns like, should people from the data set, artists from the data set, have gotten compensation? Should the developers of the model have gotten compensation for it? It's really hard to say, and a kind of comparison to that could be seen as like artists don't give compensation to whoever makes the canvases or brushes because they buy it, but it's a little bit further and more abstracted from that, and it gets closer to ethical gray areas with the more abstraction that there is. So for the second case study, I'm going to be talking about this artificially generated artwork, which actually won an art contest. So in 2022, Jason Allen won an art contest with this AI generated piece. Now, it's worth stating that he did not actually break any rules for the art contest. And prior to this, he had generated thousands of images, which can be seen like someone learning how to paint. People who paint hundreds to thousands of images before they are able to get any recognition. So people with this skill have to do similar things. A lot of times for good artificially generated art, you need to get really good at prompting things and know how to create art like this. So he actually was able to learn what makes a good art piece through these models and win a art contest from it. Now, obviously, artists were upset by this because there's more abstraction to it, but it's, again, a really gray area, and it's really hard to find a solution to this. One thing that could be a solution is there could be separate art categories, similar to how sculpting, painting, digital art have different like contests, and have one specifically for AI generated art. And I think that's been the main thing of what people have seen, but it's hard to say if art created through a medium like AI, maybe edited a bit, is different from art created through digital tools, because a lot of tools add more and more functionality in order to make it easier for you to create art. So AI is doing a lot more of the work than those tools, but it still takes a long time to learn how to generate good artificially generated images, and still has, through the prompting and through creation of the images, has a level of the human's emotion tied with them. So now I'm going to be talking about some of the ways that we can address these challenges. So one of these are regulations and guidelines. These are needed. And actually this image shows that they're being implemented a bit. For the piece by I have to go back. Hold on, give me 1 second. This artwork by Carlo, actually I tried to get ChatGPT to generate a similar piece of artwork using the styles of his mentors without mentioning him at all. And I got this content warning saying that they can't combine specific like artist styles who are modern due to policy restrictions, which is probably for the best, because this is allowing people to basically not use current artists, at least, and not profit off of modern artists as much, even if their styles might be influenced in the training of these models. You can't specifically just replace an artist with something like ChatGPT for their specific style, at least not very easily. So laws and guidelines need to be established in some facet in our society, and this needs to include some kind of clear authorship guidelines, like who owns AI art, who owns the data sets, who owns the data, who owns the models, how different people are compensated, and maybe something like NFTs along with it. So then there's kind of more tangible and concreteness to these images. So there also needs to be some kind of educational initiative, and people need to be like educated on it, especially the average person. I would say more than developers even, because I feel like a lot of people who develop AI models know a lot about them and kind of have enough information in order to see their own grounds. I feel like it's common people who kind of drive policy and public opinion through social media or just being part of our society that need to be educated better on this. So we need to find ways in order to teach people kind of more how AI works and how these art pieces are generated and how they're used and just everything about them pretty much. So that's artificially generated art. Here's a picture of a robot riding a T-Rex. I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation. Thank you for listening to it. If you sat through all 19 minutes so far, thank you. I applaud you. Leave any questions you guys have. I was planning on doing some more things with this. I was planning on creating a web app where people could guess if a piece of art was AI generated or not, but I had a lot of issues with it and I actually wasn't able to create it, sadly. I might still try over the next few days if I could find good AI generation models and good online data sets of art. But yeah, thank you guys. Here's some of my sources. And here's the rest of them. Thank you.